Hey, how are you? Those in Zoom land, those who are here in front of me. We're going to take a brief look at the human heart, just from an anatomical point of view, and then sort of the brief on how it works and why it's so important as an organ system in our body. So, I decided to put this nice picture up here on front, what inside a healthy heart. I'm probably talking to individuals who may not have that nice healthy heart, and you're probably on medications and or you've had procedures, whether that means open heart surgeries or procedures or heart cath and opening up arteries. So at least from that point of view, I'm speaking to people who are dealing with heart problems, maybe. Okay, so we're going to look at a brief look at the anatomy and a very brief look at the function. So this is an awesome picture. I got it online from Images, which, gosh, that populates most of my PowerPoints, or images I got online. It shows, I would say, in pretty good detail, and a cutaway, front cutaway of the heart, as far as where some of the electrical nodes are, like the sinoatrial node up here that my pointer is at. Where's the right atrium? Okay, and then you have your valves, one of the valves here, and then you have just basically this is the right ventricle sending blood to the lungs because it's deoxygenated and we want it to be oxygenated. And if we move to the other side of the heart here, we have electrical activity from the AV node going down the middle of the heart here between one side and the other. And we have the wonderful left side of the heart because it pumps blood to the rest of our body, pumps blood back to the heart, pumps blood to the brain, pumps blood to our circulation throughout the body. So let's move on and get some little more detail. Actually, some fascinating things really is where I want to start about the human heart. So what's wonderful? Some wonderful facts about the heart. Amazingly, it pumps. It actually boom boom. So that cardiac cycle 115 times a day, which is pretty awesome when you think about it. That's the heart you have for life. And if it's pumping 115,000 times a day, did I say 115 times? I meant 115,000 times a day. So it's pretty amazing that it's a workhorse. It's the workhorse of the body, really. And of course, our body has approximately 8 pints of blood that the heart has to pump around through circulation throughout the body, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And just to get an idea, it's about the size of a fist, your heart, and weighs 7 to 14 ounces because, it's not that hearts may vary in size, but it certainly grows as we, start out small and when we grow up and mature. So 7 to 14 ounces, but it works harder than any of our other muscles. When you think about the big muscles of the body, our skeletal muscles, the human heart works a lot harder than any of those do. So here's another statistic. In total, the heart pumps about 2,000 gallons of blood through 60,000 miles of blood vessels. So we're talking about big blood vessels, maybe to begin with or end with, and then all the way down to the tiniest of tiny capillaries and arterioles and venules that are at that area where oxygen and CO2 is exchanged, nutrients, waste products, etc. So 60,000 miles of blood vessels. That must have been a tough job, I think, coming up with how in the world were they able to, quantify that, measure that? So it's just amazing. What do they do? Pipe in an extended measuring tape all the way through. Just amazing. Now here's an interesting statistic. A woman's heart beats faster than a man's heart. Now, how much faster that is, I don't know. I didn't get that statistic when I came upon this, but I found it interesting because I didn't know there was a lot of difference that way. So, okay, one thing is very interesting about the heart too, especially the muscles, is I want to say it's a bit of a miracle. The heart has its own battery pack for the most part. Granted, it does get impulses from the brain and other systems electrically, but it's got its own electrical system and its own what they call rhythmicity, and keeping that going in synchronization uh, to help our hearts continue to beat, whether we're awake or asleep. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. There have been studies done about hearts, usually with animals, if they're put into a vessel of certain. This is a side note, not included on this, but you could put them into a bath of different electrolytes, and the thing will keep beating. And then if that electrolyte bath is transferred to another bath where there's a heart, maybe there isn't, maybe it's just a neutral bath, that heart will pick up the same rhythm. That's that's kind of how that heart rhythmicity works. And I thought, that is so cool. That is so cool. Actually, I think I remember that from human physiology years ago. Um, and I think it's another thing, it's pretty awesome, is that we can hear the activity of the heart with a stethoscope. Something that's external put up against the skin so we can hear heartbeats. And we can hear abnormal beats. We can hear different abnormalities in general of heart valves depending on where we put the stethoscope. And we can hear the opening and the closing of those valves. In fact, they have such sensitive stethoscopes now, and very expensive ones too. They make them for physicians, I think. I don't have the money for that, but I would anyway. Understanding how that technology works is kind of boggles my mind. But they have the technology uh, to zero in on a lot of those noises, even through the skin. I thought, that's advancements that we have in technology. And we can see the electrical activity also on an EKG, which is something now we have the capability to do. Linda got us a couple of those that we can just simply have you touch your fingers onto those sensing pads on the device, and it will pick up. I think we have the capacity to do up to 6 leads. Is that right, Linda? So it's amazing. You can see in real time what's going on right here instead of going into the hospital and asking for a 12 lead or something like that. So I think very cool, very fascinating. So, and this is a better way of looking at that. This is an advertisement, fun facts about the heart. I'm sure that they've put this on some sort of document wherever this came from and handed to the patient. Here's what, this is, fascinating about the heart and what exercise can do for the heart, its capacity as a muscle and why it's so important. So this is just another way of putting what I put into sentences on the page before. But I kind of like this because it kind of boils it down into these small circles. But it drives home the same points. So just basic structures, function. Again, the heart is a muscle for the most part, and it's about the size of a fist. And it kind of lies in the center of the chest, maybe not perfectly, but protected by the rib cage, thank God. There are 4 hollow chambers, okay, surrounded, of course, by that cardiac muscle and other heart-related tissue. So these chambers, 2 on the right, 2 on the left, are separated by a wall of muscle called a septum or a septal wall that's right down the middle. And it doesn't allow mixing of blood under normal circumstances, unless there are defects. We won't go into those because those have to do with disease cases and abnormal defects in the heart, usually congenital, I think, most of those. So thirdly, the top two chambers called atria, because the right and left side have the atria, and the bottom two chambers are called your ventricles. So those chambers open and close at different times, and we'll get to the sequence on that. But the chambers are separated by valves, and when the valves are doing their job, once blood enters that chamber from, let's say, the atria to the ventricle, it closes up and it doesn't allow more blood to enter into that other chamber until that a right point in time where it opens up again and allows more blood into that emptied chamber. So but we'll get to that. But it only flows, it's supposed to, if everything's working right, everything flows in one direction. And this is where the valves themselves are so important when it comes to opening, or I should say opening and closing. Very important. Okay, again, it couldn't happen without this electrical activity and rhythmicity of our hearts. Some of the impulses, like I mentioned, do come from the brain and other areas of the nervous system. But the main job of the heart, after we get, I want to say, if it's working properly, the main job is to deliver oxygen and nutrients to the rest of the body. And then on the other side of that, pick up waste products from the body and circulate out, at least for CO2, that means the lungs. And for other systems, it could be the kidneys or the liver, as far as certain waste products in the blood. Okay. All right. Are we okay out there? Zoom land, am I going too fast? No, I don't hear anything, so I guess we're okay. So, how does it move blood? How does our human heart move blood? Well, at least if we're going to start on the right side, we have this big vessel called the vena cava. And what it does, both top side and bottom side, is it moves venous blood to the right side of the heart. And from there into the atrium. And once it's done that, and this is deoxygenated blood, or I should say, it doesn't mean it doesn't have oxygen in it, but it's oxygen poor blood. I guess that's how I want to put that. And so in order for it to get reoxygenated and then processed to the rest of the body, back to the brain, etc., and to all the other tissues, it has to go through the right side of the heart, and then from the right side of the heart up into the lungs. So that process of blowing out CO2 and processing in oxygen, and that exchange that occurs in the lungs, so it can actually take place in the normal manner. It's disease conditions in the end that can interfere with that normal process. Now, on the other hand, we have the left side of the heart, and it is receiving from the lungs oxygenated blood. I don't want to say oxygen pure, but rich, oxygenated rich blood from the lungs. And it moves up through the big vessel here, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, called the aorta. And, from there, blood, especially the arterial blood, gets fed first, thank God, to the heart muscle itself. That's where we get coronary arteries. And why that's very important that gets prioritized in the whole situation. And then blood gets pumped to the brain and to the rest of our circulation. And incidentally, when you see these terms diastole, which really means the ventricles are filling, the heart's filling, that's what the lower number is. For those of you who have blood pressure, 120/80, the diastole part is the lower number, 80. When it's pumping to the lungs and to the rest of the circulation, that is systole, which means the ventricles are pushing the blood where they need to go, or where it needs to go, rather. Okay, so coronary arteries. John and Linda were good enough to show, I can't really show this, but it shows where John had a repair to one of his coronary arteries, where he had, I believe it's a stenting, some years ago. And this picture I'm looking at here that shows some of the details, well, the picture is several years old, but the fix and the situation where it was in the heart is the same. So yes, we have the technology to repair these coronary arteries to a certain extent. I won't get into that because then that gets into surgeries and why the surgeries are necessary. But sometimes those arteries actually have problems and need to be bypassed, for lack of a better way of putting it. We need to rig a bypass so heart can get to, the rest of I want to say the blood can get by the bad area and still circulate blood where it needs to go. So coronary circulation consists of arteries and veins that supply blood to the heart muscle and away from the heart muscle. So the coronary arteries supply oxygenated blood to the heart. And that's why this picture is so important, okay, for our heart to continue and maintain. So cardiac veins actually, they drain blood away that is deoxygenated. The same way it comes from the rest of the body, deoxygenated, and back into the heart to be pushed back into the lungs, reoxygenated there. And to be honest, the heart and the lungs are almost, I mean, they're so, you got to have both of them. They're so tight and so close together. And the coronary arteries really have their rise in a simplified sort of way from the aorta. And again, looking at this circulation and where the blood goes, knowing that it pumps ceaselessly, there are no pauses unless you have something abnormal going on. It is the key player in the fact that we have life. We're awake, alert, oriented, is because our heart is doing the job and circulating blood. So I wish this picture had been the other way around, showing the vein on the left side and the artery on the right side, but maybe it's just the way I'm looking at the picture. So when you look at the blue, the big blood vessels in blue, actually starting all the way down in the tiny capillary beds where they make contact with the cells, waste products are actually exchanged there because cells and I want to say the capillary beds are such close contact that there's an exchange of oxygen and deoxygen. I want to say oxygen, deoxygen. Oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place at the smallest level, tiniest level. And that movement of blood, if we're talking about the veins, goes back to the heart. On the other hand, what maintains our blood pressure too is the blood flow that comes from the heart and to the rest of the body to perfuse all of our organs, to perfuse the heart itself, the brain, kidneys, liver, muscles, everything. Again, pretty amazing stuff, pretty amazing stuff. So here's kind of a sequence here. I wish I'd gotten this in larger print, because as I was looking at this afterward, I thought, you can't really read this. You can see the pretty numbers because they're big enough, but you have a little bit of difficulty maybe seeing what's going on and the direction of, say, electrical movement. But I'll put it this way in simplified form, is that everything starts as far as electricity up here in our own pacemaker called the SA node, okay? And what happens is that the flow of electricity spreads across the atria. And then it hits this node here. It's another circular disc here in the picture. This picks up the electricity and moves it down, okay? Down the middle of the heart in that septum we talked about, all right? And what, did I go for, Sorry. Ah, okay. That's what I get for touching the wrong button. Electricity moves down in between here and hits several bundles along the way, so that that electrical impulse produces the squeezing of those ventricles, as well as up here, the opening and flow of blood from the atria. This is a little bit better picture on the right side because it shows directional flow of blood. And you get a good idea, okay, if we're talking about the big vena cava here, whether it's coming from the rest of the body or the brain, it's moving into the right side of the heart. And then the logical flow from there is from the ventricle into the through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary arteries that actually feed our lungs. And so the other side of it picks up from the pulmonary veins, which feed blood into the left side of the heart, out into the aorta, and then directional, because it goes in different directions, the aorta, to other parts of the body that it feeds. So it's pretty cool. It's a powerhouse. It's a workhorse. The fact that it can live 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, to me is nothing short of miraculous. The job it has to do for a lifetime, it's amazing. So, well, not getting into this in detail, but you know, if you've ever seen your own EKG, you may be familiar with some of these waves. There is a P wave, which means there's what's called atrial depolarization, but just know when that's happening is that those are actually active in that phase of this cardiac cycle. And that's partly atrial diastole and moving in very shortly into atrial systole. And that starts the production of what we call the QRS complex. And so you can see here, atrial diastole, atrial depolarization is right at the beginning. Ventricular systole, the first phase, because there are 4 phases of it, is the next phase where blood starts to, or where the valves close and blood is engorged in those 2 pockets there. And then there's phase 2, where blood is squeezed through those valves that run either to the lungs or to the rest of the body through the aorta. And then 3, diastole early, is when those valves begin to close, and this is a resting phase called atrial diastole. And everything actually that's atrial is in the pink, everything that's ventricular is in the blue below. And this is the rhythm, though, that the heart has to maintain to move blood. And this is why, as an organ system, the heart is fascinating, important, miraculous in and of itself. And you can think of, or maybe you can think of, so many areas along the way when it regards to the heart that I want to say can make it tough on circulation, can make it tough on the heart itself. You know, anything from whether it's high salt and we have hypertension, or if it's something else farther down the line in our vasculature that's causing a problem, or you know, some other insult on the heart itself. The fact that the heart can still pump blood through multiple insults, including heart attacks, etc. The fact that it can keep going and still within reason maintain a certain rhythmicity is again nothing short of the miraculous. That's why we are alive. So I added this picture because I think it's pretty cool. Even if you don't have a background in this, it shows the phases of the cardiac cycle and what's going on here with the atria, and then what's happening in the bottom with the ventricles. So, gosh, here it is in a little bit simpler form, perhaps. The beauty of the cardiac cycle. So it's a sequence of alternating contractions and relaxations. And the fact that it does this uh, keeps us alive. Again, this is kind of a repeat of the last slide. It basically blood flows from the beginning of one heartbeat to the beginning of the next, and so on. Heart muscle relaxes at diastole, and the chambers fill with blood. Okay, so there's no blood really being pumped by the ventricles at that part of it. And systole is when contraction is occurring and blood is moving to the lungs or to the rest of the body and organ systems. And it starts over again. So this is a pretty good representation, I think, of how that works. Diastole of filling up. And again, part of that diastole, that particular phase, is filling the ventricles up. And then ventricular systole happens with the movement of blood to the lungs and the rest of the body. So again, very cool, I think. So why is the human heart so important for us? I wish this picture on the right had been a little bigger. I tried to enlarge it, and I had to change the slide a couple of times because it just wouldn't enlarge for me, and it kind of goofed my whole slide up. So, but it gives a simplified version of really what's happening, and you can see the routing and perfusion of blood vessels throughout the body, including a few of the organs like the kidneys, which are very important to blood pressure and to the heart. So why is it important? In the end, it moves blood all day throughout the body. It's capable of controlling its own rhythm and rate, which is awesome. And it maintains that throughout our lifetime. And maintains blood pressure 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, always, whether it's lower or higher, whether we're exercising, whether we're stressed, whether we're relaxing, sleep, etc. And another thing that makes the heart so important, not just oxygen, but it delivers nutrients too, all over the body to different tissues and organs. And it picks up the wastes through metabolism and delivers them to the kidneys, to the lungs for processing out. So I guess it's not too strong to say that the health of the heart is paramount. It's the most important thing. Without it, nothing else in the body can function. Yes, we need the brain, but the brain needs blood. And that's a whole nother. So, yes, very important organ. Again, this is just basics. So how do you keep a healthy heart working properly? And I know a lot of this sounds like, whoa, where have I heard this before? Over and over and over. Diet is actually a big part of it. Diet that's rich in nutrients, vitamins, minerals. The plant-based diet that is, encouraged here is a huge part of that. Monitoring your weight, keeping a steady weight. And this will vary, because what's a steady weight? Well, for your height, age, etc., whatever, body mass index, what's a good weight? What's a steady weight? I mean, you could look at a chart and numbers all day. They don't always reflect health, that someone might be overweight. I mean, it's good to keep it down, as you don't want to become to, I want to say, you don't want to go to either extreme. Maybe somewhere in the middle. That's what I guess I mean by steady, which will vary from person to person. Physical activity and staying hydrated, very important. Very, very important in heart health and vascular health. If you smoke or use tobacco, try to as best you can to get off the habit. If you don't smoke, then don't start, as they say. Again, look into quitting smoking the best way possible. Now, don't use alcohol. If you currently drink, I've read so much literature on alcohol, different forms of alcohol, the positives, the negatives. Don't start drinking alcohol because you've heard it does this to the health and the heart and your bloodstream, et cetera, to the brain, whatever. Not a good reason to start drinking if you don't already consume. It's best not to drink in the end, though. Now, checking your blood pressure at regular intervals is a very good idea. And then as far as blood sugar goes, your diet is key to that, controlling blood sugar. And I want to say staying out of the hospitals is a good way to help that along. My experience with taking care of patients in the hospitals is when they come in, blood sugars go up, usually because of stress. But, if they have had surgeries or other things happening to them there while they're in the hospital, well, the release of, I want to say, not just the release of cortisol, but just the fact that metabolism kicks in and the use of sugar and everything changes. Blood sugar tends to get elevated. And if they're on steroids, there's another confounding factor that tends to raise blood sugar as well. If you are pre-diabetic or suspect you might be, getting that checked out is a good idea, because diabetes is a catch-all for a lot of diseases, whether of the heart, the brain, or the kidney. I learned that a long time ago. Now, adequate sleep, yes. Dave and I were talking about that this morning when he and I come in early sometimes together, or we just happen to get here together early. Both of us have sleep problems. And how important that is in the end to your heart can't be, I guess, underrated, or it could be underrated. It can't be overrated, I guess. Relaxation is something too that can help control your blood pressure without using tablets or pills, antihypertensives. It's been shown and has been proven useful in reducing blood pressure. Mindfulness is a part of that. I don't know how many of you out here or out there in Zoomland have incorporated the use of mindfulness, but it's very useful in reducing blood pressure and as well as changing your own state of mind. So by that, also adding to your well-being. Aha! That was a short PowerPoint. Any questions? Anything you want to bring up from experience? Yeah.
Yes, I learned yesterday that I used to say that I grew up with cardiology, and I didn't realize how it was because it's 68, 69, back in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's where the first EMTs, they took these guys from Vietnam who were ambulance crashers and decided that they should do something about getting a heart to keep going, instead of just saying,
Yeah. Oh,
this is a Percy Hospital in the Hill District.
now this is in Pennsylvania? Okay,
EMTs, they before it didn't exist, they were ambulance drivers, but. they just
not,
watched people
not resuscitators.
About, let's do something about it.
Yeah,
And let's get these strong guys something to do more than just watching them die. So I thought, and I've been telling everybody, I grew up, and I didn't realize it, because in 68, 69, I got my first job, but it was like a worker with anywhere. That's where I saw all this, this.
can I mention this, Mary? What Mary is stating is that, over 50 years ago in the 1960s, where she lived and worked, they actually started incorporating life-saving techniques, maybe shock as well as CPR, et cetera, together, or one or the other. CPR, yes, which is in the end most important, which in the end is the most important because shock isn't going to move blood around. It might start the heart though, but so she's mentioning that this caught on uh, during the Vietnam War. And again, it's always seems to be war that brings on innovation and change in the way we do healthcare, simply because they've had to address these things near the battlefield. And it makes sense to bring these innovations back home. So very cool, very cool. Back in the 1960s, late 60s then, 68, 69.
Started working, like I said, at West End Hospital, all this stuff.
Wow.
Got the idea of them rolling these old EKG machines around.
Yeah, I can imagine those things must have been, huge and hard to work with.
Getting up and downstairs and all that stuff.
Yeah, compared to the little Zoll monitors or to the AEDs that we have today here that you can find all over the place to start the heart. No, that's a good addition. I'm glad you mentioned that. Oh, did you know, you're familiar then where she worked? Oh, okay. Wow. All right. Very cool.
So, small world, Say, yes, I lived there and I saw it,
I'm glad you wore that tie-dye shirt with the heart on there. That kind of goes along with the presentation today. Yeah. Very cool. Okay, well, how about out in Zoom land? I know this was quick and it just kind of brushed over, uh, the importance of the heart, the pathway of blood, just glanced over electrical activity and the human anatomy involved with it. And then the sequence, how does blood move? But I just meant it to be kind of a primer, maybe to get you to ask questions or to look into it for yourself. Since we have that ability, the internet is just rich with information. Not all of it's 100% accurate, but a lot of it is good information. And so that's why I brought it in today. I mean, this is part of like our annual cyclical presentation. It's meant more as a reminder of, you know, from year to year. If you forgot this stuff, well, next year, same time, you'll get another reminder. So, anyway, with that, if there aren't any more questions, we'll just go ahead and end the meeting at this point.